What is the longest 5 minutes you have ever experienced? 6 months ago, anesthesia ended too soon while the surgeon was still stitching up my knee after realigning my patella. There were still 3 stitches to go. I still can't decide what was the worst pain. The tourniquet on the top of my thigh or the stitches. A presentation about grass. I don't know why we had to watch it. Or why they chose to do it. A really bad bowel movement when I was deathly sick with food poisoning. Thought I was gonna pass out and die on the throne like Elvis. Being young and waiting for my mum to pick me up from somewhere and she was late. Driving to the hospital with my appendix on the brink of exploding. I was screaming in pain when I got to the hospital and they pumped me full of morphine to shut me up. I will never forget the feeling of the morphine coursing through my veins. Just pure bliss and immediate relief. It was on that day I learned why heroin completely destroys lives. I have a less harrowing answer as well. The last 5 minutes of an ultrasound on your abdomen, when forced to do so with a full bladder. Especially when I got my appointment wrong and showed up an hour early. I have, in all my 30+ years, never had to pee so badly. LOL. I used to be a firefighter. My kid is still in there. He wasn't. He was hiding in the bushes next door, a bit frightened, but completely fine. I think that took a few years off my life. I was on placement with a doctor and he told a patient that he might lose his leg due to diabetes. It obviously upset him, but the doctor left to go get something, leaving me in the room with him. He must have been gone for only 2 minutes, but I swear it felt like 20. The guy was quietly sobbing to himself and I had no idea what to do or say. I'm a paramedic. When the patient isn't doing so hot, I can tell you 5 minutes on the way to the hospital lasts a long ace time. I'm a police dispatch officer and I had a 6-year-old girl call in on the emergency number and the first thing she said was, "There are men here and they are hurting daddy." The time it took for the first unit to arrive at the scene was the longest minutes in my life. We were lucky we had units nearby. Oh man, this brings back a ducked up memory. I once lived in a not so great part of town near my college. It was the night before my last set of finals sophomore year. And I had just finished studying my ass off for 2 days straight and was getting ready for what I thought would be a solid night of sleep. I wake up to a man yelling and a woman crying hysterically. I look out my window. I was on the 3rd floor and see this man standing in the middle of the street, weirdly lit by the street light, and a sobbing woman runs after him and tries to grab him. He proceeds to backhand her. She falls down and he yells at her. She gets up and I think what I saw was him punch her repeatedly. Except suddenly there is blood ducking everywhere, and she is screaming like I've never heard before. My hands went numb when I tried to call 911. And as I get an operator on the line, this woman is trying to drag herself away while this guy's kicking her and has a ducking steak knife in his hands. Luckily the cops and paramedics showed up quickly, but the first words out of this guy's mouth are him yelling, "AWW. I didn't mean it, it was an accident." Then, as he's getting tackled, he yells at his kids, who I realize at this point witnessed the whole thing. Which of y'all little itches called the cops? You know I didn't mean it. They couldn't have been older than 5 or 6. The time between a guy who was acting weird and kept approaching me while I was mowing my lawn, who then hid and was watching me from my neighbor's lawn, to when the cops arrested him. I went inside to call them via my back door. Front was locked, and he followed me and started knocking and scratching against it. I went from hiding on the ground against my back door so he couldn't see me to locked in my upstairs bathroom with a bat. By the end of it all, 5 minutes seems like forever when you're terrified. Watching X scenes with parents. I'm an adult now and it still makes me uncomfortable. We were visiting my mom when I realized I hadn't seen my son for a while. After frantically running and screaming for my 2-year-old for what felt like eternity but was only probably 3 minutes, I found him hiding in the curtains. He likes to hide when he poops. It is amazing how quickly you can imagine all the absolute worst things happening. In that short span of time I played out every possible gruesome and catastrophic outcome. I can't imagine having that feeling of panic and dread for longer than a few minutes. It is the absolute worst feeling. I did a bungee jump off the Ouska Dam in Ticino, Switzerland. It's famous for being in the opening scene of GoldenEye. The jump itself was amazing, but as I bounced up and down after the initial jump, my body rotated and the bungee cord kind of corkscrewed around my legs a couple of times. When the vertical motion finally stopped, I was hanging over a huge drop with a rocky riverbed below, and the cord wrapped right around my legs, giving the impression that it was all that was holding me up. The operators were shouting at me to remove my ankle from the twisted cord so that they could pull me back up. My rational mind knew that I was securely fastened at the hip, but the tension of the cord on my ankle made it feel like I depended on it and that I would fall to my death the second I unwrapped it. I was physically unable to unwrap my ankle for a full 5 minutes while the guys shouted down from the top of the dam. Upside down, blood rushing to my head the whole time. Eventually I found the courage to unwrap my ankle and everything was fine. But man, that was the longest, most horrible 5 minutes, upside down and being asked to go against every instinct of survival. In 5th grade, while the principal was listing off the profanities, I searched on Google Earth. LMAO, watching my crush walk away after I told her how I felt. Then she came back about 5 minutes later and just quietly told me she didn't want to speak with me anymore. Oh god. This story still gives me shivers. When my son was 3, our neighbors were getting renovations done, so there were big, noisy trucks everywhere. I was getting ready for work and popped into the laundry adjacent to the lounge room where my son was watching TV to iron a shirt for work. It took me about 2 minutes, and when I turned back to the lounge room, my son was gone. I called out that we were ready to leave. No answer. I look in the pantry. No answer. I start calling louder and louder. No answer. Looked out in the driveway. No answer. Backyard. Not there. By this time I was kinda starting to freak out. I ran upstairs and stuck my head into all of the bedrooms, calling his name. Nothing. Ran back up to the front of the house, up the driveway, down next door's driveway to see if he was watching the trucks. Still nothing. Completely freaking out now. I didn't know whether to ring the police to report him missing, keep looking, or ask the neighbors for help. There had very recently been a very high-profile kidnapping of a young boy only a few months older than my son. I was a mess. I had literally looked everywhere he could have been. After what felt like an hour, I started to run back upstairs and he was just there, at the top of the stairs. I collapsed onto the stairs, hugging him and crying. He was just bewildered, the poor little thing. Turns out he had gone out onto my bedroom balcony upstairs to watch the trucks next door. Because the balcony extended out a little past the door, I couldn't see him when I looked through the room as he was hidden behind the exterior wall. He couldn't hear me calling because of the trucks. When I looked back at my watch, it had been 4 or 5 minutes since I first noticed him missing. It felt like hours. I cried so many times that day and the following week when I remembered what that had felt like for 5 measly minutes, when another mum nearby had been experiencing that same feeling for, at that stage, weeks and weeks. This happened 4 years ago and the other child has never been found. When I was a kid, my mom told me to wait online at the supermarket, and then she went to go get some more things. The person who was at the cashier had just paid and the lady in front of me began unloading her, not heavily packed, shopping cart. She had almost finished loading and was about ready to pay when my mother finally reappeared. Those were simultaneously the longest and the shortest and most terrifying 5 minutes of my life. My dad did this to me when I was about 7 or 8. The cashier ended up scanning everything before my dad came back, and I just remember bursting into tears when she told me the total price. Wife had a seizure during labor. They couldn't find the baby's heartbeat afterwards and rushed to emergency C-section. Everything stabilized, but it was scary, seemed to go on forever. 4 years later everyone is happy and healthy. That's all for today's video. Hope you guys liked it. If you liked the video, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is simply watch the videos. But if you really want to see the channel thrive, subscribe, like, comment, add to favorites, add to playlist, and share with friends. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Reddit and Insta. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you with tomorrow's upload.